welcome back, everybody. I'm Julia C. Patrick here with the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. We have a barn burner of a show today, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I mean, this is a real challenging topic and moment for a lot of organization. When to invest in expansion of the development team, when's the right time, when's the wrong time, and how do we do it? So if we talk about scaling our organization, then we need to strategically talk about expanding the workforce to do that. So yeah, it's a great conversation and great topic today, Julia. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, my friend. Well, let's get into it. We're always happy every Friday, actually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, because we have these amazing presenting sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, and your part-time controller. And you're here today on Fundraisers Friday, so you know it's a good thing. Again, I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined by, and I tease him a lot because I say one of my faves, but he really is like at that top 5 people I know across the globe when it comes to nonprofit thought leadership. And it is the amazing Tony Beall of Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. It's
And
really
we'll just end the show there. So thank you
I
very
know.
much, everyone. It's been a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more. We'll just start right there.
Oh my God. If only, because it's kind of, if you're watching this live versus if you're watching this, through the archive, this is a Christian holiday. And so, yeah, we got things to do. I've got bacon to do, my friend. I got to get going here.
I have eggs to boil.
Oh my gosh. Well, one day we will unite from coast to coast, and I will get to try your famous deviled eggs. But
sounds like a plan.
Until that moment, we got to talk about expanding
Yes.
our fundraising teams. And I think what you said was really interesting, and that is this is like an important time. I was going to say crazy time, but that's not the right word to use. It's an important time because so many of our nonprofits are going to have to change the way they look at their revenue models. They're going to have to be doing more fundraising and looking at individual philanthropy and corporate philanthropy. So this kind of talks about that in a time, right, that we might be needing to look at our labor.
Yeah, before I kind of jump right into it, you said something that really struck me just now, and you said, in this moment in time and today's challenges, and I was having a conversation with someone the other day about that exact statement. And when I reflect on the last 20 years of fundraising, I think almost every year that I've been in fundraising, we've said things like now more than ever. If not now, then when? And so these are just kind of recurring themes and phrases that we tend to say all the time in fundraising space in an effort to just ignite action from the communities and the folks that support our organization. So I just wanted to start there. That it was, when you said that, I really. It was interesting. Just the other day, I was reflecting on a conversation with someone, and every year we kind of hear that terminology, and I think I share that because now more than ever, we do have to say things differently, and we have to call things out in the truth in which they exist. So if we say now more than ever, or if not now, then when, we've heard those phrases for decades. So we need to come up with something new as a sector to really ignite the urgency that exists. And some of that urgency does mean investing in additional development staff. And a lot of times that happens when kind of your strategic opportunities, your operational and your financial kind of align, right? It's when strategy, operation, and financial opportunities align. That's when you feel the most comfortable making the investment. It's not an additional expense. It is an additional investment, in the organization and in the scalability and capacity building, the organization. So I've already talked a lot, Julia.
No. I love that, because when we talked about, and we might seem like we just show up and start chitty chatting, but we do think about what our content's going to be. And we do think about the direction of what our sector needs when we are creating the content in the direction of the nonprofit show. And so this takes time. We don't just do it the morning that, that we go on air. So it's fascinating to me, Tony, that we talked about this and doing this show, but we didn't have the context that we have now with all of these federal changes that are coming down. So I find it just absolutely riveting that we would be having this conversation at a time where this isn't just a best practice conversation. This is a here and now. How do you navigate this emergency? And I'm going to call it out as an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I love what you said to temper this with, we've been here before. And if we don't use new language, it's just going to be, Chicken Little.
Well, it's easy to be complacent when you've heard the same terminology for decades, so it just doesn't resonate.
Right.
And I'm not here to suggest what that should be. At any given moment, I have ways of expressing how I feel that probably aren't appropriate for most of our viewers and listeners. But we kind of need to do that. And so, again, when you're investor thinking about the expansion of your development team, if all those things align, that's great. But there's also times where, in this moment in time, again, we say that often, you may need to develop new programs to support new needs in your community. So you may have to think about increasing your fundraising staff to help, support getting the funds for those new programs. You may need to expand your team because your current team is just overworked. The bandwidth is not there for them to continue to grow the portfolio of donors, especially if we're talking about that one-on-one connection and that relationship-driven fundraising. The other thing that I found interesting, like you said, we do some research clearly going into these conversations. I love to talk about my own experience because I feel comfortable about that, but I don't know everything and don't want to pretend to. And what was kind of interesting in some of the research that I did was one of the reasons why folks think about increasing their development team is to reduce risk. So if you have a team that's just one or two people, what happens if one or both of them leave? So there's this balance also of kind of reducing your risk factor in having a larger development team than not in the event that one or multiple should move on for other opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said that, because I think we don't talk about that enough. It's that who's next up, who's on the bench. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that frames more of a sustainable approach to looking at our staffing. So talk to us about in the areas of talent, because one of the things that you bring up often, and I'm so grateful that you do this, is that there's different types of talent. It's not just somebody who's good at raising money, right? I mean, that if we are stuck in that mindset, that devolves the whole concept of relationship building and understanding how to steward relationships, which you have taught me and all of us so much about. But talk to us a little bit more granular about this talent spectrum, if you will.
Sure. So when we talk about, sustainability for our organizations, that typically exists, and there's, I'm sure, data to support this. It exists through a diverse stream of funding opportunities for your organization. And not everyone possesses all of the skill sets to succeed in all of those lanes of opportunity. So someone who may be really good at one-on-one relationship-driven fundraising is not necessarily going to be the person that's going to be very successful at your grant writing. They may not be the person that's going to be really successful at building and understanding the technology behind peer-to-peer fundraising and providing those folks the tools and training necessary to, succeed in their efforts to support the organization. relationship driven fundraising is different for major gifts than it is for mid-level and lower level gifts. So, so again, wherever your organization has the opportunity for growth, you're going to need to think about the specific talent that you will need, the specific skill sets in order for someone to be successful, kind of either creating or growing that stream of funding for your organization.
So it seems to me that this is kind of a point where you need to think about these revenue streams first and figure out where you're going to diversify before you go out and search for that talent, right? Or do you think you need to bring that talent in and let them help you figure out what percentage of your total revenue strategy is going to be associated with the talent that you have? Do you see
Well,
where I'm
that
going
is,
with that?
yeah, well, that is such a great chicken or egg,
Yeah.
kind of conversation. I think for some leaders, it's very clear because they understand the community. They looked at the data, they've looked at the trends. They understand where the growth opportunities are for their organization. For others, it may be challenging because maybe the data's not there. Maybe even with the data, kind of it's still murky in terms of how to make the appropriate decision. So there, I would say, lean into consultants and other folks that can come in, a very finite time period with fresh eyes that might help you better define what that looks like. And when we talk about areas of talent where the team might grow, again, more opportunities than ever for contract and fractional talent to come in and help you, if not do the work, help you build the systems to support the work.
Love that you said that. I think that's super genius. And again, I hadn't really thought of that, but I think that's really an amazing way to go, especially if you're a little bit more timid. You made the comment versus, expenditure versus investment. And if you're a little bit afraid or your board's afraid, maybe this is a strategy to take so that you can kind of all be swimming in the right direction. Let's pivot a little bit to the value of adding talent that knows the mission. I mentioned to you in the green room that I attended a celebration of life for one of my community, really in one of the states' most successful fundraising thought leaders, an amazing, amazing human being. And I ended up, so it was like old home week, right? A lot of people, we all knew one another. We were celebrating this amazing human being. And we ended up with a group of people that had, in many cases, started in one area and then navigated to another. And specifically, I was telling you that several of them had done animal welfare, and then they had gone to health and human services. And they were all kind of chuckling about how this individual that we were celebrating, he had helped them. Because when you're dealing with pets, it's a lot different than dealing with homeless families, right? I mean, it was fascinating. And they all talked about how they had to realign their knowledge to a mission. It was fascinating to me.
Well, it makes me think about when I first decided that this was the space that I wanted to commit my time and talent to. It didn't matter to me if it was puppies or babies or veterans or the environment. I just wanted to work for an organization where I felt like I was making a difference. The mission really didn't matter. But I will say that when we talk about growing a team, certainly having someone that really understands the mission, it might be a volunteer now that's interested in employment, or a board member. I've seen where board members have become executive directors and CEOs of the organizations where they served on the board. So these things happen. And it's a shorter runway for them. It's a shorter runway in terms of their understanding of the organization, maybe their understanding of the impact, their understanding of the programs and services, their understanding of the value proposition. So I think if you have the talent that already lived the mission even, or understands it through some other way. That shorter runway is just, of course, going to make them more successful, and you'll see the return on that sooner than if there's someone that needs a longer runway because of just the understanding and really the deep dive into the mission and programs.
Right. So before we go on, then I've got to throw you a curveball. Get up your catcher's mitt.
Okay.
And we've kind of talked about this before, but along this same line, if you met somebody, let's say at a car dealership, and you were like, holy moly, they are great in sales and they're great, in developing a relationship. Do you think that that is smart to bring somebody in because they have that natural sales ability?
Yeah. So again, I think if we look at the kind of the varying revenue or funding streams, they may very well fit nicely in one of those. I would say your onboarding might be a little different, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So we're someone that might have had a history in philanthropic development work. You may start with mission first, then programs and services. That individual coming from a sales background, the first thing they're going to understand is product. What do I need to know about the product to sell the product? And so the product, of course, is your programs and services, your impact to the community. So I might rethink of my onboarding training based on, we're going to talk a little bit about this, right? Based on their kind of previous employment and experience.
Dang, this is why you're such a smart guy. I love that you just said that. That approach gives me permission to look at people and talent outside our sector.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that you said that. Okay, so then let's talk about this because it kind of aligns a little bit. And that is that person or talent that has community connections that can open doors. That's kind of an ephemeral thing, but when you know it, or when you see it and and you're like, that can work for us. I mean, I think about corporate community relations managers for, big organizations, utilities, even municipalities, and all the way through county to state government. Talk to us about how you see that type of a person fitting in.
Yeah, so I look at that as a great value add, but I am not going to hire a new team member because they claim to have a portfolio of donors or corporate sponsors that they're going to bring to the table. I'm not hiring you for your portfolio of potential. There's no guarantee that anybody in your portfolio is going to be as committed to the mission that we have compared to the mission that you're currently supporting and that they're currently supporting. So there are all kinds of other skill sets and soft skills that need to be part of the decision making when you are bringing a team member onto your team. So I think that that's awesome, right? I know so and so well. A lot of people know so and so because they go to the chamber annual meeting every year and they shake his hand. So I really do think that that's a great added value, but it's not the first thing I have ever looked at. And if someone leads with that kind of in their letter of introduction or something, I tend to kind of put them on the B list.
Not what I thought you would say. That's really interesting to me.
Okay.
Not what I thought you would say. And so, see, I learn something new from you all the time. And I kind of get where you're going there. It kind of gave me the chills when you said, I'm not bringing on board somebody because of their portfolio. And that's something I'm going to have to think about because I see what you're saying. And I don't think I've ever processed it the way you just mentioned it.
Well, I think what the portfolio proves is their ability. It is proving to me that they have the history of success to do the job. But I don't like when folks apply for a position and lead with that. Look at who I know, look at, and make the assumption that those individuals or corporations are going to shift along with them. I've seen it plenty of times where it happens, and it happens very successfully. And that relationship is so strong, and the trust that those people have with that professional fundraiser is so strong that they're willing to go wherever they go. But I would really look at the portfolio as more of proof of their success and their ability to perform than a guarantee that they'll be bringing those dollars in the door with them when they join the team.
Well, and Tony, I mean, the way you phrased this and the way you framed it up for me, I think that's a more conservative and more stable approach, because it kind of helps level set what your expectations are, and it maybe protects everyone from this unrealistic expectation, right?
Yeah. I think it really is level setting the expectation. And I don't think it's fair to that individual, because as much as they may feel like they can make that commitment, they're not holding the purse strings ultimately. And there are any number of things that could happen outside of their control that would prohibit them from being able to live up to the expectation that these individuals are going to contribute with their new employer.
Right. Okay, well that's riveting. I need to kind of talk about this aspect too, because this somewhat dovetails to what we were just talking about, and that's understanding previous employment and performance. How do we understand the gravitas of disclosing information that maybe you shouldn't, protecting a previous information about donor behavior with another organization? It could be a competitor. I mean, it's kind of a dicey thing, and I'm wondering what this looks like and what the sanctity of that information is.
Yeah, well, I think that, we have to heavily rely on fundraising professionals to maintain the level of confidentiality that I think we all sign up for when we decide to work in this space. Yeah. So when we are interviewing for positions and we're presented with competency-based or scenario-based questions, we can answer those and bring in our experience without having to say, well, I worked with Mr. Smith at the ABC Athletic Association, and we can share our experience and prove our success again in either those competency-based or scenario-based questions without having to give any type of information that really should not be shared publicly.
Okay, I think it's an interesting aspect because when we're looking at now what has become a competitive environment, there are a lot of fundraisers that are going to be introduced into the marketplace. It's going to be more competitive versus like, yes, please just come work for us, right? And so I think that this is going to be one of those things that gets amplified and is more part of the discussion than ever. So that's going to be kind of interesting. Along those lines, talk to us about what you're sensing for understanding salary range and benefits, and understanding the competitive set within not only your community, but within the sector.
Yeah, so as I'm kind of monitoring, some of the things that I see on LinkedIn in terms of, positions being posted, whether they're local or remote. So I'm not a talent acquisition expert or an HR expert, by any means. I will say though that I think there is a real benefit to organizations posting a salary range when they post an open position. Right. And I think there's a number of reasons for doing that. One is I think it wastes a lot of it prevents a lot of people from wasting their time, right? Both the organization and the potential employee, if that range just doesn't, sit well with that potential candidate. But I also would want to say that for folks in HR or in talent acquisition roles, if you have posted the salary range for a position and someone applies for it and you say, oh, they're overqualified, we'll never be able to afford them, don't count them out because you posted the range.
Yeah.
And I know there are plenty of folks in the workforce right now that are looking for positions that are a little less stressful than the one that they had, that maybe is 1 or 2 steps down from what they were serving in before, because they want a little less accountability for the organization, and they're willing to take a lower salary because they recognize that there is lower accountability. So that's what I'll say about that. And then also, when you see roles being posted that are virtual, a lot of times that virtual salary may adjust or may not based on where you are geographically compared to where kind of the hub or whatever of the organization. So just, I don't know that I have a straight answer for this. It's all over the place. And, major gifts fundraisers sometimes are paid more than event managers. So the roles vary. And again, I think it has a lot to do with the level of accountability and the level of expectation in terms of how your role contributes to the overall goal of the organization.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And I also do believe, just to go back to the HR piece, I think that is an evolving best practice that you do post that salary range. It used to be like, that's never done. And that's really, bad to do or even talk about. But I think there's just more and more of a push to say that up front for many of the reasons that you said right off right out the gate. It's going to end some wasted time and energy on both sides if you declare that. And before we move on, you said something to us not recently, and you've said it actually before, and that is, in terms of benefits, sometimes it can be additional time off, or a benefit is working remotely 2 days a week, or taking half a Friday off, or whatever it is. That can somehow be a magical offer to somebody who you might think you could never capture their interest for your organization.
It's very true. And depending on, I'm sure labor laws and all of that,
Sure.
sometimes folks are willing to, I would love an additional week off, and you don't have to pay me. Like, I'll take a week off without pay just to be able to have another, to know that I have 3 weeks a year instead of just 2 or whatever that looks like. So as much as of course, we could customize, packages for our team members, we should definitely do that, as opposed to kind of taking a cookie cutter approach. Still recognizing and valuing that there have to be standards of practice, and that if we offer something to one team member, that there needs to be an equitable way to offer that to all. So, I say these things knowing that there are, deeper considerations, with all of them. In terms of fairness and what the law may or may not allow within your state compared to other states.
Right. I think that transparency with labor is such an important thing. And it's also changing. I mean, it's changing the way we navigate the whole process. One of our amazing partners, Staffing Boutique, they come in and they talk about some of these aspects, and it's changing, but it also has some compliance issues that are really important. And it's also, Tony, I think we don't talk about this enough, it's a branding issue too. When you're always changing your staff, sometimes that makes people think that there's poor management, versus saying we're growing. I mean, then people are like, wow, that's a group to really get behind. I mean, there's some other things at play here that sometimes we forget, that kind of figure into the whole ecosystem of it. Well, as always, I just learned so much from you. You get me all energized. I think for you, one of the things that you bring to me and to our viewers and listeners on the Nonprofit Show is really a new way of looking at things that are always so positive and empowering and achievable.
Well, thanks.
Achievable. So thank you very, very much. One of the things that we are always interested in is what you have to say, our listeners and our viewers. So reach out to us. You can we're on so many social media platforms, but you can also go directly to info@americannonprofitacademy.com and then let us know what you're thinking and where you need help as a professional fundraiser. And then we'll
Yes.
get it on the show. Tony, you mentioned last week, our whole discussion came from one question that a viewer had, and we built a whole show around it because it was just so interesting to us that they had reached out. So again, it's amazing. I'm Julia C. Patrick here today with the amazing Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. He is amazing and a supporter along with our presenting sponsors: Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, your part-time controller. These are the folks that make it possible. They make it possible so that I can end each and every show with this mantra as well: to stay well so you can do well.